leadership, of both young and senior leaders, but also organizational leadership, because unhealthy people don't produce healthy organizations, right? So we need to be healthy people so we can set up our organizations well for transition. Amen? Let's welcome our panel. Y'all are in for a treat. We had a Zoom meeting a few weeks ago, and we instantly had so much to talk about. So I'm actually going to turn it over to y'all to introduce yourselves. Barnabas, would you like to start?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Barnabas Lin. Maybe the most important thing to know about me is that I spent the past decade plus investing in Asian American leaders, and specifically in the past couple of years with Asian American ministers in their late 20s.
Hey everybody, I'm Tamise Spencer-Helms. I've been doing ministry work for about 15 years with young adults. I started a nonprofit called Subculture Inc. that is seeking to remove barriers for BIPOC students in college.
Hello, I'm Kathy Dudley, and I am the founder of Voice of Hope Ministries in Dallas, Texas, and also Dallas Leadership Foundation, and now Imani Bridges, which focuses mostly in Nigeria.
Amazing. It's so good to be here with you. It's an honor to be here. So the first question is, why is leadership development and planning for leadership succession an important conversation? And can you talk a little bit about having a vision for leadership development? Kathy, we're going to start with you.
Well, I should tell you another part about me. I grew up about 2.5 hours from here, and I was the 12th child of sharecroppers. So I understand what poverty is like, and I understand the need to have others support and encourage and give access. So it probably shaped much of the decisions that I made. But when we started Voice of Hope in 1982 and then Dallas Leadership Foundation in 95, I realized that the most important thing that we could do is start with the goal of transition or secession. That became our number one goal. And so we really focused on 5 to 12-year-olds, but we wanted, by the time they were teenagers, that they would be many of our volunteers. They would be the teachers of the younger people. We would give them job training, et cetera, because we realized if we did not focus on that when we started our housing program, our dental clinic, or all the other things that we were doing in community development, that it just might get lost. So you would find our students actually out building the houses in our housing program, or you would find if we wanted to teach them to engage in the community and do cross-generational work, we had to send them out to serve the senior citizens. Or if we started a clinic, it meant that they were going to work in the clinic. And so I think that intentionality, that focus, that drive was incredibly important. And having that at the beginning, we've done that in each of the other organizations that I've started as well. And in Imani Bridges, I think we're at the final stage of another secession within the next couple of years, hopefully. And I'm really, really excited about that.
Amazing. Thank you.
I actually don't have much to add. I mean, I'm thinking about when we think about leadership succession and the passage about waiting on the Lord. And what's interesting to me is I was getting this image of relay races. The next leg in the race is not waiting to run. They're waiting for a baton, right? So I feel like how we can encourage them to go ahead and start running and give some sort of signal that this baton is coming. And that's how I've been thinking about leadership succession, like in terms of the work that I do.
That's so good.
Yeah, I think that all of us that are here probably know that leadership development is really important. When I think about the vision I have, or the vision that we share and hope to have for leaders in the future, I think the question is, what kind of vision do we have? Because I think that we're shaped deeply by a world that takes advantage of upcoming talent. And so how do we actually live like Jesus did in giving away power and developing leaders in such a way that how we do what we do actually bears witness to who we follow?
It's good.
That's so good. So good. We had a really great discussion on this, so I'm really excited for this next question. Tamis, we're going to start with you, but I just want to ask, what are some ways that we can effectively bridge the gap between generations and work intergenerationally in this process?
Yes, so this is my favorite topic, and I think some of you, I've spoken at CCDA before, and so you know I love hip hop, and I'm recognizing this intergenerational dialogue that's happening in the culture that we can kind of pay attention to when you're seeing these sort of collaborative albums. You have older generations sort of speaking to younger generations. Younger generations are speaking to older generations about their particular plight, and what's happening is they're able to recognize wisdom in one another's stories and call that out. And to me, that's demonstrating the Malachi, hearts of the fathers turning to children and children turning to the fathers, and that precedes this extreme sort of manifestation of the Lord that is unprecedented. And so for me, I think this intergenerational conversation is really important, but I think it has to be a sort of a call and response that's taking place between the generations. I recognize wisdom there. I see wisdom here, that we call those things out and empower one another. Yeah. So, that's it.
Yeah, I think that we live in a world that's so polarized right now, and it affects us and our churches and our organizations as well. And I think that that's one thing that's helpful to note, is that we're living in a world right now that's really suspicious of one another. Mm-hmm. And the more that we can just name that and say, we want to live in a different way.
Right.
We still want to live in a way that leans in and trusts that the Spirit has a way of bringing us together that can make us understandable to one another. And so I hope that if we name that the way that the politics of our world does affect us, it can help us come to the table and say, there are many who have gone before us who have so much to offer us. Yeah. There's wisdom even in the dead for us to receive, as well as there are those who are living and growing up in the world right now that know things that we just cannot know. And if we can partner together, then we can actually move forward.
I started my first ministry when I was 20, and there weren't a lot of women leaders that I could find. So fortunately, God brought men into my life. I met John Perkins in 1982, but it was Dolphus Weary that I stood on the shoulders of. I love that analogy. And then I found myself, all through those years, it took me about 20 years to find a woman leader that I could stand on the shoulders of. And I made a decision that I would always let men stand on my shoulders, but that I needed to focus intentionally on making space and helping to remove the barriers for women to have a voice.
Is it okay if I go off script a little bit? Okay. I would love to hear your thoughts about all of the intergenerational and also gender dynamics as well from an organizational standpoint. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Well, there are systems like with race and class and other things that's there with gender, right? And so those systems actually prevent access. I personally think that as Christians, our biggest problem is our theology and not understanding.
Talk about it. Say it again.
Our biggest problem is our theology, because we do not understand that the Bible teaches biblical equality. And equality is different than equity, but we need both. And so when we embrace true gender and racial and class equality, which Paul talks about in Galatians 3, right? He says that in Christ, there's three things that do not exist. So why do they exist in us as Christians? Why do they exist in the church? And that is, there's no Jew or Greek, so there's no racism. There is no bond or free, so there is no classism. And guess what, folk? There is no male or female. So if sexism is part of our theology, it will create barriers beyond imagination. And I'll give you an example. Now, I'm not bashing Billy Graham, But the Billy Graham rule of a man should not be in a room with a woman alone. Right? Come on. What does that do? You know, are we simply sex objects? I mean, we've got to understand we need space. We need community. We need access. We need training. And I am determined. Tomorrow, I'm going to share what we're doing in Nigeria. And let me tell you, if there's one place on the face of the earth that didn't understand this 19 years ago, and I believe that our Nigerian who will be here talking on the panel will tell you this, but I can tell you what started with 17 very, very powerful men. But when you look at the leadership now, it's about 50% women. Mm-hmm. And because I have decided I will not focus on anything that does not, at a minimum, give access to women. Over 50% of the body.
Amen. Denise, I can see you like on the edge of your seat.
I don't even know how to, I can't follow that. Can't follow that at all. I mean, I think the biggest place that I'm recognizing intergenerational making space, I have a 4-year-old. And I think, for me, when I think about intergenerational and making space for those coming behind me, in my work, what I try to do is try to anticipate the questions and begin to gather some answers. And so that can create this space where they're navigating their own challenges in their own generation, but they're not worried about things that weren't answered back in the past. Like, so for me, I'm thinking about setting up space and going before them in terms of my learning, in terms of the way that I teach her about the earth, the way that I teach her about her body, about herself. That's kind of the way that I'm working that out right now in my personal life.
So good.
Yeah. I think your question was about organizationally too, right?
It was, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good. You're good. I think organizationally, because of what's going on in our country and the suspicion I was talking about earlier, I think it's important to remember that we want the same things.
Yeah.
Even though we might come with different concerns, we ultimately want well-being. We want flourishing, but we're also hurting in different ways.
Yes.
So if we can come with a hermeneutic of actually trust and curiosity and ask, what's hurting? Because I still believe that we're going for the same thing here. Then we can actually hopefully move together as organizations. It is concerning to me, I think, that we see a lot of organizational breaking apart. Because we, in some ways, I think organizations do help us navigate a lot of the chaos in the world. So how do we actually make spaces within organizations where we can come together and dialogue in spaces which say, you have different knowledge than I do, and we can bring all of our knowledge together so that we can seek a way forward together.
Yes. But see, like with subculture, what we're trying to do is help people make space for Black students. And one of the main things that I think people aren't thinking about is just, are these people at the table of decisions early enough on? And what I think about a lot of times is like when Jesus asks questions, Jesus asks a lot of questions, and he asks things like, you know, what do the scriptures say? How do you read them? And what does it look like for us to ask these generations, what do the scriptures say? How do you read them? And being able to make space in that way and being open to maybe some difference, maybe some changes and things like that, that's kind of where I see it's really hard, because I think a lot of times it's so much that is about them, but it's without them. They're not at the table when we're making these decisions for them. And so I think that's number one, is just bring them to the table early enough, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that there's a way when we're in so much chaos that we can want to like narrow things down and make things safe, which is good. But what can happen is that we can narrow down all the options when what young people need is to dream big dreams.
Yes.
To just bring, I think we should just have the Bible and say, come up with as many interpretations as you can, and then let's together talk about what's best, what's the better interpretation, and also be open to the fact that there are new things that God is doing in each generation.
Absolutely.
When we were on our Zoom call, and you said something like that, and I thought, wow, I've put a lot of my energy in CCDA and behind the scenes, really focusing on leadership development. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was an intentional cohort, because the cohort program has changed CCDA. It's been one of our major I think, accomplishments is that we've seen now people rise up from those cohorts. They are leading CCDA. They're the people you see on stage. But what if we had intentional cohorts? And it doesn't have to be through CCDA, and I'm not adding work to you, Lorenzo. But, where do we create these spaces for intergenerational cohorts?
Yes.
Where you actually go on a journey where you can learn from one another. You're sitting at the table as equals, and not, the guru and, the peon. It's not that at all. It's just you come together knowing you have something to give, you have something to receive, and you go on this journey together. Because I think that's what Jesus did, who is our greatest model of leadership development, right? He started intentionally with, I think before he did any miracles, except the one that his mother forced him into, he chose his disciples, right? And he began to work with them and model, let them see everything he did. And then what did he do? He put them to work. And he put them to work early while he was working, so they were prepared. Well, how could we create intentional structures that brought that kind of life to the next generation, but also continued meaning to those of us who have gone ahead?
Yeah, that's good. Brenda, you heard that right. That's so good. And you guys have already started talking about this, but I want to dig a little deeper. What are some of the challenges in making space for leaders, or both for the seasoned leader, some of maybe the personal challenges, organizational challenges, identity things, and also for the emerging leader? What are some of the challenges, and how do you think that can be addressed?
Yeah, I think that some of what young people in general face is a reward for when you assimilate to a structure.
Come on.
I feel that for sure as an Asian American in this country. And so when you assimilate to the structure, there are parts of yourself that you have to kind of cut off. So I think one of the biggest challenges for us in terms of developing emerging leaders that can be themselves is where do we make spaces to voice the pain? Because that has to happen somewhere, or else we're just bleeding all over the place. Or what happens is that we create leaders in our own image. And we don't want to do that. We don't need people like me, doing what, it's different issues. We're different people now. We need kids who are dealing with what kids are dealing with and telling us and teaching us what are the issues that you face. So I feel like we need to create spaces, I think cohorts or dialogue spaces that may not feel super productive to the overall mission of the organization, but actually create spaces that allow people to heal and recognize that healing is a gift that they will bring to the entire community as well. That they can name ways that the system has caused pain, which we all know we don't want to do. None of us want to do that. But we can actually grow as they give the gift of their pain, and we can heal and move together.
That's good.
I mean, I think it's we kind of know what they're hurting about right now, right? And I think there is a sort of conversation we have as a body together about whether or not we're willing to enter into some of these conversations that have been taboo or maybe not allowed even in the church. And I think that if we don't have those conversations, again, we're answering questions no one is asking. But we're also demonstrating that Jesus cannot, that the scriptures, the Spirit of God can't stretch to meet where they are right now. But we have to begin to have hard conversations and to really be honest about that, because I think otherwise there's a gap that we can't fill. It was something that was said this morning about teaching them how to wail and teaching them how to lament. And I was backstage just thinking, like, have we even thought about teaching this generation to lament what they're experiencing? I mean, gun violence, police brutality, you've got all of these issues that are happening right now. And I think we've really, as a church, have to humble ourselves and begin to go, like, are we even in the room? Like, are we in the room where these conversations are happening? Because Jesus is in the room, I think. And so I think that that's something that we really have to think about, and that there's grace for that for us, for sure.
So good.
I'll add to that. I think on the other side, you're asking for both sides of, as I've invested too in young and emerging leaders, I do feel like one of the most helpful things that was told to me in my early 30s was part of your job as a leader is to absorb people's pain because people are hurting. And I wish that somebody had told me that earlier because it would just prepare me better to know that that's part of the job description. And I think a lot, one of my best friends, she just gave birth yesterday. And I just think about the fact that we know when we become parents that part of it will be pain. But that is a part of the, but I'll just be real honest with you, like, I'm not Jesus. So pain coming at me from people that I've invested in is hard. But I feel like if we could make that normal, that that's part of our jobs as leaders, then we can actually expect it and process it together and we don't have to be perfect. We can be like, I tried my best and it was better than, I tried to do better than my dad did, but I know it's still not enough and forgive me,
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
You ask about the challenges?
Yeah. It's
don't have
such a
enough
rich
time.
conversation, yeah, but
That's why we need cohorts.
amen.
I think it's different for a founder because when founders give birth to something, it's your baby.
You ain't never lied.
And your whole identity gets wrapped up in that baby, right? I think we have different challenges on, say, larger organizations or even organizations that have become very large that were founded and the founder's still there. And in this room, we have a blend of all of that. But I think we need to do a better job of how to make space for those who are making space. How do we, even if it's painful and difficult, as you said, how do we always make sure that those leaders are valued and those leaders have even a voice? It doesn't mean you can control or dictate, but there should be space. And I think that, I also want to look at it from the other hand, because though I've transitioned, I haven't always done it well. And I think if we're honest, we have to say that. Because, there's this sense of the dance of what that means to have the balance of giving up, moving away, becoming less, they become greater, and thank God for me, each time God gave me a new vision and I could just go do something, something different that was similar, but that I felt God was calling me to. But I don't have all the answers, but I think that more work, and maybe, again, cohorts or something like that, these intentional communities could help in that healing. I love the way you said that, because I think that is the space or spaces like that where that can happen.
Yeah, I agree. And along with that, empathy, like those spaces are so important because it creates proximity and empathy towards each other, right? As the young leader, you can look to the senior leaders and be like, if only. And as a senior leaders, you can have opinions about emerging leaders as well. But those spaces would be so key in creating the sense of empathy towards each other and understanding.
Yeah, I think what was really helpful for me, somebody modeled this really well in a dialogue space that I was in. And he was older, and he was sharing about the pain that he's experiencing as he's leading these organizations. But one thing that I just really admired and was grateful for was he said, in some ways, I know that I need to keep my pain secondary because I live within a power structure still where I have all the power. And I just so appreciated that he was able to name that, because it allowed me to not have to hold all of his pain, but also be able to partner with him as another human who is experiencing pain. So I was just so gifted in that moment by somebody who was able to see the power dynamics in those dialogue spaces still.
And that really triggers something with me that I think is very important, and that is, though I experienced enormous gender discrimination, from the moment that I started Voice of Hope and then DLF and Imani Bridges as well, there was this clear understanding that I wore my privilege every day. And so there was this sense of it's whoever should really lead this organization ultimately should look like the people who are the majority. And so it wasn't just that I made a commitment to transition leadership from day one, but that it would be, and the community change, that could change, right? Yeah. Because the idea is the community itself really should be choosing its leaders. And sometimes when you're a founder, they don't feel like they have that choice, you know? And so, you know, I do think that's an important point that you're making.
Good. Before we move into closing thoughts, I wanted to give you did you want to jump into that conversation?
No, I just think I have the baby organization up here, right? So mine is only 4 years old, as old as my kid. But I just realized that. But I'm thinking about how, for me, there wasn't necessarily the space to really put legs to some of my ideas when I was in some of these institutional places. And so you go out and you start your own thing, and we see that. I mean, look at all the influencers. They were like, you're not gonna give me a job, I'm gonna make my own way, we're gonna put on these eyelashes, and now I'm a millionaire. So like, seriously. So I think but what's wrong with that is that I didn't have a lot of the wisdom that I actually needed to run a business, to start a business. I just knew I had this idea and there were no doors. I could not push through the doors. No one saw those ideas and said, let me get behind that. Let me help you. Let me push you. So I go out and I start my own thing, and it's like, now what? I don't know what to do. And so I think that you've got people in your ranks that have ideas, and I would say, please open doors, use your social capital, use your wealth, hello, and open doors for folks that have ideas, because I think that that's one of the ways that we're gonna make some more space. Yeah.
So good. So we just have a couple minutes left, but in closing, is there anything else that you guys would like to add or exhort or share? I feel like we could have this conversation for the next 6 hours, but in the next 3.5 minutes, is there anything else that you would like to add? Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Yeah, I can start and just say that, as I've been focused on investing in younger Asian American ministers over the past couple of years, it's been a great joy. You were talking about cheerleading, to be able to steward the power that I have to actually make more. There's just an abundance that can come, which feels miraculous in a world that's so scarce. So it's just a joy to participate in. But secondly, I would say it's easy to get discouraged, but when you're investing in younger leaders, it's real hard because they're amazing. And I think that feels to me sometimes that the world is dark. But then when I look at the young leaders that are coming up, I'm like, I have a lot of hope. Yeah. And so I hope that we can continue as organizations to figure out how to be able to make space for all these gifts that are waiting to be birthed from this next generation.
So good.
Amen. I think as a young leader, just saying, I need older leaders in my life. I need your wisdom. I need to hear from you. And I think so do the generations after us. And I think if we think of ourselves like, GPS systems, that they tell you where they want to go, and you can reroute if there's a hazard, or tell them where to turn, or tell them, if you take this route, it's more scenic, but it takes longer. I think that that's what we bring to this table and to these emerging leaders, is that we function kind of like a GPS system for them, that we're not driving, we're just helping to navigate. And I think that that's where I would love to see us go as a body in the future, yeah.
That's a word.
I do have one other thing that came to my mind. I think tomorrow we're going to talk about church-centered community development, because I passionately love the church, even with all its problems. And I'm talking about the Big C church, because I really, until probably the last 15 years, I didn't find a church that really could embrace me as a woman leader. But the Big C Church has always been my space, the diversity of it. So in Nigeria, we have a young man that came to us and said, we want to do a football program under the Big C banner of Imani Bridges. And so we have over 800 now in that program, and young men and women that are like early teens all the way up to 30. But the churches, in this area, about 60 churches we work with, couldn't understand that why we couldn't put those 800 kids into their churches, right? And so what we have been looking at is, how does the church go to the kids? And I think it fits a little bit on what you're saying. So we're literally now looking at different denominations who are willing to go to the field when they're playing football, soccer, and they are going to do church. And we said, we don't care which brand, you just got to make a commitment. And so the second thing is skill development, and it fits a little bit into this. I know it's a developing world story, but we said, why are we expecting these young people to come to our training classes? We take the skills where? To the field. And I think this is one of the most exciting things we've done because it's going to unleash all of those gifts. It's going to make the connections for the church and the people, that are there who are in great need. And so anyway, pray for us because it's a new endeavor, but I think it's going to be important for leadership development.
Wow. Well, it has been an honor. Let's give it up for our panel one more time, y'all.